Okay, now that you've got your nice coil made, let's talk about how to put it on here and match our template. So I've got my paper template. If you've got the opportunity to kind of transfer this to a more heavy-duty piece of paper like a 3x5 card, that would be great. It won't be quite so floppy, but this one will do the work just as well. So based off of this, if I'm putting my template here, the positive shape of my pot, what it's supposed to look like is this. I know that coil, or that shape of that pot's supposed to go out, so I know that coil has to go out. So when I put this on here, I'm going to start right here at the end of this coil, and I know that my coil needs to come out and kind of barely touch my template. And then I'm just going to keep the rest of it kind of in the same place. Now, from here, what I like to do is kind of look straight down at my pot, make sure that it's a circle, make sure that I've got the same amount of kind of a step out in this case as we go there, and now I'm going to trim it to the right size. Again, in class I would use a fettling knife. At home you can use a butter knife. I'm going to cut through both of these, actually get rid of that little piece, and now I know my coil is going to go there. So let's talk about how to get this coil really put on there well. So this is where I'm going to use slip. So I've got my container slip that I would normally have at school. Feel free to take some of this and dish it out into a little Ziploc bag or some little container. Just need a little bit for each project. Please don't empty out my whole container. If you really need slip and you don't have any, you can make your own. Slip is just this clay with lots of water added to it, and it kind of mixed up. So if you got some softish clay, you can put it in a bag and kind of put some water in there and squeeze it around and make your own slip. It will maybe not be as smooth as the slip that I have here, but it will do the trick. All right, now what I need to do now is put this coil on this pot permanently. So I've got to do some slipping and scoring. So scoring is using this scoring rib, and you can see these serrated marks on here. And I want to put some slip in between here and here. And that's going to go together like that. Now I also need to slip and score this area right here where this coil sits. And I'm going to do both sides of it. This is the proper tool in class, this serrated scoring rib. If you don't have one of these at home, you may not. Guess what? A fork works just as well, and will get you what you need. You could use a plastic fork, you can use a metal fork, doesn't really matter. All right, now I'm going to put a little slip on here, and my only goal with the slip for a coil pot like this is to just kind of barely fill up those scratches that I made. Okay, and this is going to sit flipped up on there. Now, when I'm looking at my coil pot, I got to be real careful that I don't have this coil sitting so that it's really doesn't have much holding it for it to sit on, like a foundation. So if I were to have this sitting too far over, it doesn't really have anything to sit on. It's going to fall off. So I got to make sure that, number one, even trying to match the shape of my little mug there, I got to make sure that that's not going to fall off. Okay, so I've got that put together. Now what I would normally do is use my wood knife, and I'm going to do this on the inside and outside. I'm going to take just a little bit of this coil, I'm going to smush it into whatever is below it. In this case, it's the base. The next time I do this, it'll be into this coil right here when I put another one on top. So that is my goal. And you see how I'm holding it out here on the outside? I don't want to push this coil off of the base. Again, if I push that out, it may just completely collapse. So I don't want that. Okay, so I've got my coil blended from the inside. Now I need to do the same thing on the outside. So I'll hold this up a little bit and show you what that looks like. And you can see just kind of a repeated pattern there, taking a little bit of this coil and mushing it into what's below it. You probably don't have a wood knife at home. Guess what? I bet you have a spoon. A spoon will do just as well, taking a little bit of that coil and mushing it into whatever is below it. And again, in this case, it happens to be the base. In other cases, it will be another coil. And again, my job is just to take a little bit of this and kind of fill over that seam and mush those together, okay? Now, the temptation right now is to go back and really try to smooth that out. You don't really need to do that, but what I do want to do is just make sure that this coil is in the right spot. So looking at it down from the top, making sure that it looks like a circle. I'm picking it up. You probably don't need to do that. You can just look down. I'm just doing that for my video. And then what I'm doing is just kind of making sure that it's sticking out the same amount all the way around. So this looks like it could come out just a little bit further. This side looks like it might be out just a little too far. I can always just push that in just a little bit, okay? So now I'm ready for my next coil. So I need to roll another coil, and then I will be ready to put that on there. Okay, got my next coil, ready to put it on here. Again, I don't know exactly where it's gonna go yet. I'm just gonna sit it there, and now I'm gonna use my template to kind of tell me where that coil belongs. So I can tell here, I'm sitting that there, that coil needs to come out a little bit further. So I want to make sure that that matches all the way around. Again, I can look down at it from the top. I can spin this around and kind of check it in a couple places with my coil. And then I'm ready to overlap and cut. And I always try to cut right in between so that it takes a little bit off of both of them. Again, making sure that it looks good. I'm going to take this off here. I'm going to slip and score in between, slip and score here, blend that together, and keep going as I build. Okay, so I rolled this coil out. It's not quite long enough. Let's talk about what to do when we get to that position. So first off, let's make sure again that I've got it in the right spot. This is going to start going not quite out so far. It's going to go just slightly not up. By the time I wrap that around, bummer, don't have quite enough. I do have this coil that I made, and you can see that it's a little bit bigger than that one. So I'm going to splice in one, and it's fine to do that. It means that you really need to make sure that they're the same size. And I'm going to have to chop off both ends of this one to make that work. So I'm going to cut a little bit out of this one, a little bit out of this one, so it's flat there. I'm going to cut the end off of this one and line that up and cut that one. So if you got a spot in a coil that is, the rest of it's fine, one little part of it's messed up, you can cut that part out and continue to use that coil. Just make sure that it feels like it's a good fit, okay? Okay, and you can see that coil went back in there just fine, filling in that little gap. So I've got a couple more to do. You can see right here it's going to start going more straight up, and then it's going to start angling in a little bit. Let's talk about using your positive template for a second. So this is the shape of our pot right now. The positive template is what my pot should look like. So I like to hold it up against there every once in a while, like every couple coils, and make sure that it's about the right size. So that's how I can kind of check that it's going to be the right. So it's hard to show you that in video. It obviously looks like the paper is way bigger, but that's kind of what I'm doing, is just making sure that as I go up this high, that my pot is the same width and matching what I want it to look like. Also, keep in mind that if I've put a coil on and it's not quite in the right spot, now is the time to fix that. Don't wait until later. And constantly look at it from the top and make sure that it stays a circle. Okay, that's what you want. When I get to the point where I'm trying to blend these coils that are coming back in a little bit, it's a little harder to blend like I used to, just kind of straight down. So in this case, I would switch to using my finger, and you're kind of pushing down and kind of at an angle, and that way I can really get in there and blend that together. Please don't forget to blend that. Some people like to add coils all at once and then come back in and blend them. Please don't do that. They'll be too dry to blend later, and it will not stick together. So don't wait to blend. Put one coil on and make sure you blend it as you go. Another thing to talk about real quick is about your scrap clay. So these are little bits of coils and that sort of stuff that I ended up not using. I'm going to make sure you put this into, or make sure I put this into a block. You want to do the same. I'm going to poke a hole in it since it's a little chunk of clay. I'll put a hole in it, add water to it. And again, this can go in my Ziploc bag. It could go in a little container, and keep that clay nice and ready to use for next time. All right, so I've got one more coil left. I'm at that point, and you can see that it's going to go right there. I really want to make sure that last coil is just the best coil it can be, and I want to make sure that this is flat so that that top coil is at the right height all around. So I'm going to tap this one just to kind of pat it flat and make sure that it's flat all the way across. And then I'm just really going to be picky about that last coil that goes on there. Make sure it's nice and round. That's where your lip's going to touch, and you want it the best it can be. The other thing about adding this last coil is the exact height of your template may not match. So in this case, I am just like a 1/16 of an inch short. I'm okay with that. Or I'm okay if it's a tiny bit taller. If it's going to be a little bit too tall with your last coil in there, just fold that top piece out of the way so you can see what you're doing. But I'm okay if that's a tiny bit taller or a tiny bit shorter. But your ultimate goal is to match your template. If you can match your template, that means you are able to control your materials, which is ultimately what we're after. And there's my finished little pot. Obviously, it needs some smoothing, and we'll talk about that in another video.